We're going to sit. I think we're going to sit for the Q&A. Do you have these questions?
I do.
All right.
We had many questions. If we asked all the questions, we'd be here till midnight tonight. So we tried to select a reasonable sampling. So the first question is, I need a microphone. All right.
The first question is, that's what he said.
Captain Kelly, why did you want to become an astronaut?
Well, in 1969, when Neil and Buzz were the first astronauts to walk on the moon, I was in kindergarten here in West Orange. My brother remembers that. I don't remember the moonwalk, the first one, at all. I think my mom said I fell asleep. But I remember the other ones, and I remember just how exciting that seemed. And if somebody has to be an astronaut, why couldn't it be me? So I remember being about 7 years old, and I told my dad I wanted to be an astronaut. And he said to me, he said, "Son, there aren't many of them, and they're really smart." So I didn't think about it for a while until I got into high school. I started thinking about it again. I was like, well, why not me? You know, somebody has to get this job. So it was pretty young age, and it was about my parents were cops, so I wanted to serve my country in some way. I knew I'd do that, and I wanted to go in the Navy and fly airplanes, but that just seemed like the logical conclusion. And ultimately, and that goes for anything, whether you want to be a neurosurgeon or an accountant or a lawyer or police officer. Somebody's going to get the job. So why can't it be you?
And somebody said, you can't be an astronaut. And that was the kind of guy you are that said, yes, I can. I can do anything I want to do.
That's right.
Now, this is a Homer question. Captain Kelly, did you live up the hill in West Orange or down the hill?
I actually lived both. So I was in the second grade. I lived on Mitchell Street, which is in the valley. And I don't know this hill. It's a bump, right? And then I lived up in the corner of Eagle Rock and Pleasant Valley Way, near what used to be called Pleasantdale Elementary School.
Very good. Can you describe the experience of seeing the Earth from outer space, and did it change you?
So I talked a little bit about that, what the Earth looks like from space, and it changed my thoughts about the environment significantly. When you realize that, and you see it with your own eyes, that, we're stuck on a pretty special place, but we're not going anywhere else. And when you can look at the atmosphere from 250 miles up, our atmosphere is basically like the thickness of, if you're wearing a contact lens, it's the thickness of the contact lens on your eyeball. In fact, half of the atmosphere is 10,000 feet and below. The runway at Newark Airport? It's probably about 12,000 feet long. You stand that runway on end, that's half of our atmosphere. I remember just before I knew anything about this, I'd look up and say, oh yeah, we got miles and miles and miles. Well, not really. And seeing the deforestation that has happened in the Amazon between my first flight in 2001 and my fourth flight in 2011, over a decade, one person, me, could look down and say, wow, that looks a lot different from space. A lot less Amazon, a lot more pasture, a lot of carbon that came out of trees, sequestered in trees, now in the atmosphere. In a decade, this planet's over 4 billion years old. A little sliver of time, you can see that we have changed it, that gets your attention. The environment is something I obviously pay a lot of attention to right now.
Have you ever seen a UFO?
You mean like aliens?
Well, not necessarily aliens, but just an object that was unidentified that no one has ever been able to give you an explanation.
I've been to Area 51 in the Navy. You heard of Area 51? There are no aliens in Area 51 because they moved them to Area 52. So when you think about aliens, though, you think about what's the potential for life in our universe. We launched this several years ago. We launched this thing called the Kepler Planet Finder, looking for Earth-like planets in this neighborhood of our galaxy, so close to our solar system. Unexpectedly, we found a lot of them. So many that if you extrapolate what we found around our solar system in this neighborhood of our galaxy is pretty big, 100,000 light years across. But if you extrapolate that to the size of our galaxy and multiply that number times 2 trillion, which is the number of galaxies minimum that we have in our universe, at least 2 trillion galaxies in our universe, the number of Earth-like planets in our universe is more than the number of cells in every single human body on Earth. In all 7.5 billion of us. You know how many cells you have in your body? Like 40 trillion. It is a big, big number. But, to answer your question, no, I haven't seen anything. But I think, if there's probably life in other parts of our galaxy, in other galaxies in our universe. From our experience here on Earth, there's only one species so far, us, that has ever been able to leave the planet and go into space. And, the chimpanzee, he's pretty far away from building his own rocket ship. And we've seen, billions of species on this planet, come into existence and then become extinct. And then you think about, well, what's the prospect of some intelligent civilization coming to our solar system and coming to our planet? And from what we understand about engineering and physics, doesn't seem like it's a high probability. The closest other solar system to us is around Alpha Centauri, right? 4 light years away. Sounds close, 4 light years. It's the distance light will travel in 4 years. Light travels 189,000 miles in a second. You know how long it takes us to go 4 light years? If we wanted to go 4 light years now, how long do you think it would take?
I don't know, 20 years.
20 years. It would take us, you're close, it would take us 20,000 years. At the speed we can currently travel at 20,000, that's to get to the closest place. So the prospect of meeting up with alien civilizations, just seems pretty far-fetched. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't usually work out for the less developed species. So probably don't want anybody coming to visit us. Should hide out here in our corner of this galaxy.
You heard and you saw some of the scouts that are involved in our STEM program. There's a major emphasis, obviously, in education. What do you think is the importance of STEM in today's youth as far as their development of their STEM?
While I was at NASA, the Department of Defense did a study, and they do this rather somewhat regularly, on what are the biggest threats to our country, like security threats. You know what was really high on the list? Was science and math education in the United States. Of us falling behind other countries. In Japan they have, and China I think, and South Korea, they have about 3 times as many engineers than they do attorneys, no offense to the man to my left. But in the United States, that's opposite. We have about 3 times as many lawyers as we have engineers. And nothing against lawyers, they're very important. But if we don't fix, and I want to applaud all the people involved in that STEM program and the Boy Scouts for doing this, if we don't fix this science and math education issue we have in our country, we've already started to fall behind. We will continue to fall behind to the point where it really puts us in, some future risk. So we got to continue to focus on that. So if you're one of the young people here and you're interested in science and math, keep going. Keep focusing on it. If it's something you really like, nothing better right now to be a senior in college graduating with an engineering degree. You got a lot of job offers.
This question, you had mentioned Mars. Someone asked, do you think that there will ever be a time when Mars will be colonized?
So will Mars be colonized? So my brother went into space for a year so we would have more data on the human physiology in order to send somebody to Mars someday. That was the purpose. My twin brother, also an astronaut, went aboard the space station for a year. You may have seen some of the articles where there was a lot written about his DNA and how his DNA has changed from his year in space. The radiation can be significant. We don't know of radiation, zero gravity, but I think the word hasn't gotten out how bad it is for him. You know, it's gotten so bad that we recently had to release him back into the wild. He's like halfway between like an orangutan and a howler monkey. We even changed his name to Rodrigo. He lives in the woods. He lives in Eagle Rock Reservation. No, it's, we'll figure that part out. But the year in space it was hard on my brother. And his DNA isn't really messed up. He's got some issues called epigenetics, which is how your DNA responds to certain things. That has changed in him.
How often do you guys get together, you and your brother?
We often do a speech together similar to this. So we have a speech together in San Diego in a couple weeks, and then in Abu Dhabi in about a month.
Okay. And I guess the last question, and then we're going to thank you. How does it feel to float in space? Is it like flying or falling?
So you're actually falling. You're in zero gravity because you're falling around the Earth. You're in free fall around the Earth. That's why we're at zero gravity. If you want to get to zero gravity because of distance away from our planet, you have to go about 3 times as far away as the moon if you want to get to zero gravity. So even like the Apollo guys, they're falling to the moon, then they're on the moon, they're subject to lunar gravity, and then they're falling back to the Earth after some propulsion gets them on that trajectory. So you're literally falling, but when you're aboard the space station, it feels like you're flying around like Superman. Well, as a kid, I used to have dreams about flying around my neighborhood. Didn't think I would ever, come to really find out what that felt like, but ultimately I did, through a lot of hard work. So work hard, focus, don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. And that'll serve you very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Capt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Captain Kelly, we would like you to Scouts, come up, please. We would like to present to you, these are the shoulder patches from our
awesome.
most recent jamboree.
Cool.
All wounded warriors. This is our council patches, and we thank you so
Awesome.
much for coming here.
Well, thank you very much.
And
Let
we
me see.
hope you enjoy this.
Here.
Thank
Maybe we could take a picture up here?
Yeah.
Why don't we go to the middle here?
Yeah. Come on, Scouts.
And let's move this out of the way. And, okay, you stand here. You stand there. We'll hold this like this. And when it's got glass on it, you tilt it down a little bit. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. You're going to have to mail this to me.
We're getting toward the
Let me go get my
one
stuff
of
out of
the
here.
highlights of the evening. At this time, I would ask